I would like, before we get started, I would like to introduce some of our guests that are in the room today. The first one, if you would please stand, is Richard Dix. Richard is running for Belgrade City Council Ward 1. Retired police officer, and he works at MSU Office of Institutional Equity. So Richard, thank you for joining us today.
Cool.
The next person is not here, but his wife, Deb Reinhardt, is here today. And her husband, Eric Reinhardt, is running for Belgrade City Council in Ward number 2. So 2 people we need to support. And we have apparently 2 other council members here, Betsy Mancuso, Town Council of Manhattan. And also City Council member Jim Doyle from Belgrade, Ward 2. And also Billy Love, Montana Federated Republican Women District Director for District 3. Thank you, Billy. And last but not least, we have former Representative Tom Burnett. All right, so I am going to get started. We're going to kind of go in reverse order, and we're going to start with Senator Gordon Vance.
Carol, thank you. I'm going to be brief because we are way behind. Jennifer Carlson has got a couple of things she would like to go over with you. She is a first-term member of the House, and I've been doing this now for 7 sessions, and in my opinion, she did a pretty outstanding job. So Jennifer, would you like to say a few words to everybody?
Yeah. Thank you, Gordy. I won't be quite that brief, but I was planning on being brief. And I will be here after. If anybody has any questions that they want to ask me, I know there are a lot of questions on one of my bills, and I'm happy to answer questions as long as it takes. But right now, I want to say to all of the people in this room who are my constituents, thank you so much. And for those of you who are not, I represent Three Forks, Manhattan, Willow Creek, Clarkston, Dry Creek, and Spring Hill, and Churchill. And I live in Churchill, and I loved this job. It was a really exciting time for me to be in Helena, and it was a really exciting time for Republicans. I know that Gordy was going to go through a list of the accomplishments that the legislature finally got signed by the governor, and it was really great. Are you going to do that?
Briefly.
Okay, so I will let him do that. And I had 4 bills this session. 3 of them were signed by the governor, and the 4th bill that was actually tabled very quickly in the tax committee, I will be bringing back next session with an agreement with MACO, which is Association of Counties, that they will work together with me to get that passed. And what that bill was, it allows homeowners to pay their oldest property tax first in an effort to get their property out of arrears and hopefully buy them some time if they're in jeopardy of losing their home. And I really want to get that passed for Montanans. So the 3 bills that the governor did sign of mine were one bill that deals with vaccine exemptions for students who have been injured by vaccines. That was it was a really important bill for me. It affects my family, and I've been working on that issue for a decade. And we brought a bill similar last session, and it passed this session, and it's going to create some protections for school children. The second bill that was signed was a study bill, which the interim committee that I'm on right now, Health and Human Services, is going to be working on, is a study of the children's mental health system in Montana. It is a huge issue, and it affects a lot of, as we all know, mental health problems affect everyone. But if we can help with the children, we all know that children become adults, and if we can help in the beginning, maybe we can have less of a mental health crisis with adults, which we are also studying in our committee. So that is something we started working in that committee yesterday in Helena. And if you have any questions about what we're working on there, I would love to talk to you. We have a study bill on the foster care system and what we need to do to recruit and retain good foster families, and a study bill that will delve into what triggers child removals and what are we doing to return children to their families when it is appropriate as quickly as possible. As you might know, Montana has the second rate of child removals in the country, and we need to do something about that for our children. The fourth bill that I sponsored this session, and that was signed right after the session ended. It took up most of the last week of the session. It was quite a journey. Was House Bill 702, which makes it illegal in Montana to discriminate against a person based on their vaccination status or their possession of And I really appreciate, I know there are a lot of people in this room who showed up in Helena. There are a lot of people who sent messages to your legislators, and that made a huge difference. And I hope that you will continue to be involved in legislation that you care about, because that is how legislators know, and that is how they remain accountable to their constituents, is you contact them. It's a very busy job. I worked from about 7 in the morning till 7 at night, pretty much every day. I slept most of the day on Saturday when we weren't working, and then came home to try to love my family for one day a week. And, but I loved the job. I loved working for my constituents, and I see a lot of hope in Montana with the legislature that we have, the state officials who were elected across the board. We're gonna hear from Hero today. And I will be here after. If anyone has any questions, please come, even if you just need to get my card so that you can call me later. I want to answer your questions, but I don't want to take up all day. I'll just end with one thing, and that is during the interim session, your representative has time to talk to you. And so if you reached out during the session and possibly didn't get the answer you wanted, or they didn't have time for you, don't hold that against them, because like I said, between a committee, hopefully eating lunch, the floor session, another committee, maybe eating dinner, reading bills at night, they're just, it is an honest to goodness excuse that they don't have time. And so please, reach out to them now on things that you care about. Hold them accountable to their campaign promises. And that would be the last thing I want to say, is that when I campaign, I'm not a politician. I'm a mom. I have 5 kids. I've raised chickens. I homeschool. And I try to go to town as little as possible, buy feed, and drop my daughter at ballet, where I sell eggs to paper ballet. So that's really my desire to leave my home. But this was important, and I loved it. And when I ran, I promised that I would stand up for life, and I'm happy to say we did. I promised to stand up for the First Amendment. We passed religious freedom. We passed First Amendment, freedom of speech, freedom to assemble. Second Amendment, we passed some really great Second Amendment bills. I promised to fight for school choice, and we did that. Disability rights are on top of my list of things that I personally care about, and we made some headway there. We dealt with school, improving schools' ability to retain and recruit teachers, and to give local school districts the right to be innovative, to reach the students that they need to reach. And those are the things that I promised to do, and I'm happy to say I did those things to the best of my ability, and I would love to be continuing to do that in the future. So please come talk to me if you have any questions, and thank you, Carol, for inviting me today, and I'm sorry I'm not as brief as Gordy.
Thank you, Carol, and anybody that has served with me can tell you you're not the only one.
Jennifer.
I'm sorry, Jennifer.
But you can thank me
Very,
too.
very briefly, I brought a handout. There should be a couple of copies on each table. We passed almost 80 bills this time that were good pieces of legislation. And this is my 7th session, and the first 6 were with a Democrat governor, and all we could do was play defense. And so it was kind of nice to be able to do something different this time. We passed a tremendous amount of good legislation having to do with a tremendous amount of subjects. And I'm gonna hang around, as Jennifer said, after we're done. And if you go through it and you see anything that you want to talk to people about, please let us know. It shouldn't be, but we'll see if we can make that happen for you. I'll talk to Shelley about it. And so before I introduce the main speaker, the other thing I want to tell everybody is that I've been representing Senate District 34 for the last 8 years, and thanks to term limits, I won't be able to run next year. So I'll be holding this Senate seat until January 1st of 2023. And our intention then is that the person who is going to be replacing me is going to be my wife, Shelley. She will do an outstanding job because she will be as solid a conservative vote as I am, but she's not as big a pain in the ass, and so people will enjoy talking to her. So with that, I would like to introduce to you the individual that, and I was born and raised in Montana, so I can tell you, as you can see, I've been here a while, he is the best Attorney General that we've ever had. Amen. He's taken a tremendous amount of heat from the press, and anytime that happens, it's a good thing. Yes. He very recently, in fact just last week, and this is just my opinion, but he put the fear of God into the Supreme Court. Yep. We passed Senate Bill 140, which basically took away all of the power that the trial lawyers had to determine who was going to replace judges that leave either the district courts or the Supreme Court. We were sued immediately by a bunch of Democrats, and everyone thought we were going to be in big trouble, but because of the pressure that he has put on them and the light of day that has been shown on the Supreme Court, they voted 6-1 that the bill was constitutional. Knudsen came into the House in 2011. I was there at that time, and those of us who were there could tell that he was going to be something special right away. I was fortunate enough to be made Majority Leader in 2013, and he was Speaker Pro Tem. He then was Speaker 2 sessions in a row, which is quite an accomplishment. And now we have him, as I said, as the best Attorney General I have ever seen. With that, Austin Knudsen.
Thanks, folks.
No pressure.
No pressure, no. I'm just gonna let Gordy stand up here and tell you all about me. That works out really well. Thank you all. My apologies for being a few minutes late. If you're heading to Helena through Townsend, give yourself a little more time. The road construction's awful. And it wasn't just a couple of days ago. Like Gordy said, my name's Austin Knudsen. I'm your newly elected Attorney General. Thank you. Been on the job for about 6 months now. If you don't know me, I'm a farm and ranch kid from northeastern Montana. I was born in a farm and ranch up there in Roosevelt County, about 60 miles from the Canadian border and only about 10 miles from North Dakota. But grew up raising registered Angus cattle and putting up hay and combining spring wheat, doing all the things that farm kids in Montana do. Never had any inclination I was going to be in the legislature, let alone be a statewide elected official someday. So it just goes to show you what an MSU graduate can do in Montana. I have to thank Gordy and Shelley. These two truly are like my legislative parents. Gordy took me under his wing right away when I got in the legislature, worked with him, worked with Mark Blaisdell. Shelley, she's gonna make me cry if I keep looking at her. Shelley truly has been like my mother throughout my legislative career, and I'm just so tickled that she's gonna come be in the Senate. She's gonna do a fantastic job and be a great senator for Gallatin County. So please support Shelley Vance. You know, when my wife and I decided to run for Attorney General, we knew it wasn't going to be a very easy road. Particularly if you look at where I'm from. I'm going to tell you all, Culbertson, Montana, not the ideal place from which to headquarter a statewide campaign.
Well, it's bigger than this room.
A lot of mileage between here and Culbertson. But you know, I was working as the county attorney at the time. I was prosecuting bad guys. I was really enjoying what I was doing. I was getting to work in the courtroom a lot, dealing with the methamphetamine problem, which I will talk about here shortly. But we were kind of living the dream, right? I was my own boss. I was the county attorney. I had 3 young kids. We're living on the family farm. I'm needing to raise my kids the way I wanted to raise them. We're in my little small hometown. Life was pretty good. Really wasn't terribly interested in a statewide run. But you know, a few things happened locally and then statewide that kind of turned us around. In 2017, we had a drive-by shooting past my kids' school in Culbertson. 650 people, and we had a drive-by shooting. Two meth dealers going between the Fort Peck Indian Reservation and the Bakken oil field, shooting at each other, 3 o'clock in the afternoon. And that really was one of the things that kicked me to run for county attorney, and then ultimately to really dive in and learn more about the methamphetamine problem, the drug problem, the crime problem, frankly the gang problem that we have in Montana, and get more involved. You know, primary, we were the underdog, frankly, even on the Republican side. We were outraised, we were outspent. But we ran a good aggressive campaign. We thought we had a good grassroots message of you know, crime prevention and cleaning up Montana, and we won big. I don't know if you maybe didn't see it during the general election. We kind of got outspent and, you know, outshadowed by this little Senate race and little governor's race. So you might not know it, but we had what is the most expensive attorney general's race in Montana history. It was $7 million spent all into the AG's race. And just to put this in perspective for you folks, I mean, again, I was the underdog here, and you have to understand what I mean when I say that. We were going against a young guy named Rafe Graybill. Rafe had been handpicked to be Governor Bullock's chief legal counsel at the time. Rafe Graybill was the next up-and-comer in Democrat politics in Montana. He had been handpicked, hand-groomed. This was their next guy. The problem they had was me. And frankly, he was green. I mean, he was 30 years old. He barely practiced law in Montana. To say he was wet behind the ears is an understatement. A very, very inexperienced lawyer. And again, we ran a very aggressive, very hard-nosed campaign, and we had to throw some elbows because we got outraised. I mean, the trial lawyers just threw buckets of money at this kid. But look, we came out with an almost 20-point win in that race, and here I stand. So, thank you all. Couldn't have got here without all of your wonderful support. Folks like you got it done. Thank you so much. So, what have we been doing? Well, I mean, Gordy alluded to a few of the things. We've been aggressive. I came into the Attorney General's office, and what we walked into, frankly, was a bureaucracy that was very bogged down. Very bogged down, not terribly interested in trying anything new and doing anything different and being aggressive. And that's what me and my team came in and decided we really, really wanted to be. We wanted to come in and lean into this thing. We figured we had an almost 20-point victory on the Republican side. That was a message. And the message was, we're not going to do things the way they've always been done. Montanans want aggressive, they want forward-leaning, they want conservative. That's what we're going to bring. It's been tough, I'll be honest with you, working within the Department of Justice, almost 1,000 employees all told throughout that entire department. You got motor vehicle division, you got the highway patrol, the forensic science division, which is the crime lab. Go down the list, there's a lot of people there. And there was a lot of resistance to us coming in and really wanting to move things, especially on the litigation front. You may have seen we've been pretty aggressive on some federal stuff. You know, one nice thing about a Joe Biden presidency, it's a target-rich environment. He's given us no shortage of fights to pick. And we've really kind of worn that on our sleeve. We've rolled our sleeves up and decided, you know what, we're going to be leaders in this. There are 26 other Republican state attorneys general, excuse me. And then the nice thing about that is we can spread out the work, right? I can take lead on some of those big cases. I can share that lead with a Texas, with a Louisiana, with a Florida. But we really have, I think, in our first 6 months, stepped forward and really distinguished ourselves as the Department of Justice and the Montana Attorney General's office and taking the lead in a lot of these big pieces of litigation. And I'll just give you a couple of examples. Keystone XL. Now, we've got some bad news recently here about Keystone XL, but if you're a guy from my part of the state, the Keystone XL pipeline project was huge. $60 million a year just in property taxes. Okay? That pipeline was set to become the largest property taxpayer in all 6 of the counties it was going to go through in eastern Montana. Okay? This was going to travel through some of the most rural country in the nation. Okay? Lots of jobs, lots of prosperity, lots of tax revenue. I mean, if you're in Macomb County, one of the poorest counties in the country, and you suddenly got a taxpayer that's going to bring in over $10 million a year in new tax revenue to that county, you're thinking of the roads you can gravel, the highway, or excuse me, the sheriff's deputies you can hire, the great stuff you can do for your hospitals, go down the list, your school district. This thing was going to be a huge boon for these counties. It had been approved by Congress, and you have to understand that. Yes, President Trump approved the permit, but more importantly to the legal side of it, the Congress and the Senate had acted on Keystone XL clear back in 2011, okay? And President Obama let that go into law. So we had congressional action on this. So when President Biden comes in on day one and cancels that permit and says, okay, I as the president purport to have the authority to just pull the plug on this, that created a real constitutional issue for us here, and this is what we're fighting in this case right now. The U.S. Constitution is very clear. The power to deal with interstate and international commerce is reserved to the Congress, not to the president. Very clear in the U.S. Constitution. That's clearly what we've got here. We've got a multi-state pipeline, an international pipeline. This power belongs to the Congress. Joe Biden did not have authority to come in here and basically issue a veto 10 years later, because that's really what he did here. And that really is the heart of our lawsuit. So we took the lead on that case. We've got 23 other states on board with us, which is huge. But we're the lead argument plaintiff on this lawsuit. It was tough. Last week, TC Energy threw in the towel. Not unsurprising, disappointing for sure. That's a company that's I mean, they've lost $1 billion, with a B, $1 billion on this project now. And they've walked away. That puts us in a tough position. As I stand here right now, I can't tell you for sure what this means for our litigation. We're going to try to keep it going forward because I think there are some serious constitutional issues that need to be addressed, most likely by the U.S. Supreme Court. But when you've got the main backer behind this pipeline walking away, that I'm not going to lie, that puts us in a tough spot. So we'll see what happens with that one. Another really big one, you know, I ran on the methamphetamine problem and the crime problem in Montana because there is one. If you're not familiar, I tell you, go visit with your sheriff, go visit with your chief of police, go visit with your county attorney. They'll all tell you the same thing. Montana is facing a huge methamphetamine problem, and it is driving all of our violent crime rates up drastically. Not little bits, not incrementally. We're talking double-digit increases in all of the violent crime categories across the board, whether you're talking about assaults, aggravated assaults, robberies, rapes, sex assaults, homicides. They are all up drastically. And this is all being driven by Mexican cartel methamphetamine. 100%. Almost none of the methamphetamine in Montana is homegrown anymore. That used to be the problem 15, 20 years ago. The cartels have got this figured out. They're mass producing this stuff south of the border. It is cheaper. It is higher quality. Easier to get than it ever has been before. And as a prosecutor who's dealt with methamphetamine addicted individuals, it's pretty stunning to see what this stuff does. And what people will do to get more of it, and the lengths they will go to get more methamphetamine. This is, in my opinion, the biggest problem facing our state, and in any category, is this meth problem. Unfortunately, we've got a president who has thrown the doors even wider open on the southern border. And that really is the crux of the problem. I mean, I make the analogy with the highway patrol and the things we're doing in Montana. We are treating a serious gunshot wound with a Band-Aid. I don't have the tools to stop every vehicle that comes into the state, because that's how they're getting the stuff up here. It's all being transported on wheel. I can't stop every vehicle that comes in the state. I don't have the constitutional authority, and even if I did, I don't have the manpower. We get lucky once in a while, right? I mean, someone's got a busted taillight or doesn't use a turn signal, and we make a stop and they act suspicious, and we run a drug dog, and great, we get a 10-pound meth bust. That's fantastic. And that's a huge amount of methamphetamine, but what concerns me is for every one of those we stop, how many have we missed? This is the single biggest problem that we're facing. I know I said that already, but I really want to underscore this. So what can we do about it? Well, we've joined with the state of Arizona, leading in a lawsuit suing the Biden administration, asking them to follow the law, enforce federal immigration law. If you break the law and come into the country illegally, that's it. If you break the law and come into the country illegally, there have to be consequences. One of the first orders President Biden made was a moratorium on deportations. That's against federal law. Federal law says if you catch someone coming in the country illegally, they have to be deported. There's a process. They have to be seen by a judge. But all that process has basically been thrown out the window under the Biden administration, and they're just turning people loose. They're not giving them court dates. They're not telling them to appear. They're citing them and just letting them go. That's what's going on right now. So when you've got that kind of activity going on at the southern border, you're just inviting more and more of these smugglers to come in across the border. They've gotten very, very sophisticated about it. We know this. The cartel's operations on the southern border, a lot of times it's decoy. A lot of times they'll run a whole bunch of illegals across over here. So Customs and Border Patrol will run over there and they'll smuggle stuff over here. I mean, they've gotten very sophisticated about this, and we need to understand what's going on. But that's one of the really big lawsuits that we've gotten involved in. I think is probably one of the most important ones for our state. Lots and lots of things I could continue talking about. Let's talk about the judges thing really quick. Gordy mentioned it. We've got a problem with our state judiciary.
Amen.
Any Republican lawyer in this state if they had the courage to say it, would agree. We've had a judiciary in this state that has been controlled by the Democrat Party and by the plaintiffs' bar, the trial attorneys, for decades. Decades. And they've just run over top of us, time after time after time. They're in a little different position now because they no longer have the governor's office to play defense for them. A lot of the legislation that the Supreme Court would have had to deal with, Brian Schweitzer and Steve Bullock could just veto before it got to them. But now they're in a tough position, and this really is one of the reasons why we've taken such a sharp, aggressive stance on the Supreme Court. There's going to be a lot of important legislation moving in the next few years. We've already seen a lot of really important legislation. House Bill 102, which expanded concealed carry. Senate Bill 140, I think one of the most important pieces of legislation we've had in the last 20 years. We just got rid of the Judicial Nominating Commission, which is controlled by the plaintiffs' attorneys and the trial attorneys. The governor now gets to pick replacement judges. This is huge, okay? Because this is going to swing either way, whether it's a Republican governor or a Democrat governor. But right now, Governor Gianforte, under the law, gets to pick those replacement judges. That immediately got, we were immediately sued, as Gordy said. Now, what happened here? Why? I've been asked a couple times. Why am I being so aggressive? Why are you being so mean? These poor judges. You're upsetting the apple cart. This is the way things have always been done. Why are you doing this? Well, here's why. What we found out, so first of all, our Chief Justice, Justice McGrath, he recused himself out of that case immediately because he had actually been lobbying the governor not to support that bill. So I think correctly, Mike McGrath removed himself from that piece of litigation. That's good. Here's the bad. They immediately appointed a replacement, a district judge out of Butte. That's fine, they get to do that. Well, we got a hold of some emails that showed the Judges Association were doing internal polls of themselves with their lobbyist, and that judge in particular, that Butte judge, had said early on that he didn't like this bill, didn't like what it did, didn't support it, thinks it's bad law. He's prejudging the case. Okay, that obviously raised some concerns for us. So we pointed that out. That was a bit of a black eye for the Supreme Court, right? That judge had to recuse himself suddenly. Well, then a flurry of other activity happened. But basically what happened, you had the legislature, under their duly given constitutional power, issue some subpoenas to the court. Okay, the legislature can issue its own subpoenas. They asked the Supreme Court, we want to see more of your emails. These are public documents. Gordy will tell you, Jennifer will tell you, Tom will tell you, I can tell you. Your emails, if you're an elected official, are no longer yours. Those are public record. They have to be retained. The Supreme Court has an email retention policy. They knew this. Well, we requested these emails, and it turned out the the head administrator of the Supreme Court says, my bad, I deleted them. Oops. Well, first of all, that's illegal. But second of all, I think they forgot all those emails go through the state servers at the Department of Administration. And we were still able to get them. So we issued a subpoena to the Department of Administration. Well, this is when the Supreme Court really panicked. The court administrator, she ran out and she hired a lawyer. And I really want to underscore this because this is just incredible. Because I don't think the Supreme Court would have done this for me. These lawyers were able to call the Chief Justice of the state Supreme Court on Saturday, get the court to issue an emergency order on a Saturday, call the clerk of the Supreme Court on a Sunday, pull him out of church, make him come to the Supreme Court chambers, open up his office so they could file this emergency order stopping the legislative subpoenas on a Sunday. Now let me ask you, do you think if I called up the Chief Justice on a Saturday, he'd do that for me? No. Absolutely not. And this is the problem. The plaintiffs' attorneys and the trial lawyers in Montana have had control and friends on the Supreme Court for so long, this is business as usual for them. So when I start shining a little sunlight on this and start making some noise about this, they start screaming bloody murder, which is where we are right now. Thank you. We've gotten a little pressed over it, but I feel like if we're making them squeal a little bit, we're probably doing the right thing. So anyway, I could stand up here and talk to you for a long time. I would rather, if anybody has any questions or wants to ask me something, I'd rather do that. So let's just do that. Yes, ma'am.
So with your new ruling about 702 that Jen worked on and you worked on, are you going to form some kind of a committee or a group, or is there somewhere in your office where we can institute some teeth in that thing? Because it's just a law if there's no enforcement and if there's no penalty. There's got to be a consequence that will affect change in behavior, because businesses are still failing to comply, still acting illegally and operating illegally and discriminating, particularly against people like me that are disabled. I would like to see there be some penalty in this thing. There's got to be some teeth in this to make it damned uncomfortable to not to do what the law says.
Absolutely. So House Bill 702 was you can't discriminate and you can't discriminate in employment practices in Montana based on your vaccination status. We've been getting a lot of reports about this. A lot of those reports are coming to my office, and so what we've decided to do, primarily what we're seeing is these are out-of-state companies who also have a footprint here in Montana. And so they're taking their Washington state, let's just say, they're taking their Washington state policy, their corporate policy that says you have to be vaccinated to work here or else. And they're sending these letters out to their employees in Montana. We've gotten enough of these that so my office is stepping in. My general counsel, we've drafted up kind of a form warning letter to start with. And these are gonna start going out this week. Just a warning letter, say, hey, we've got House Bill 702, which is now law in Montana. Your practices here, what you're purporting to do, is not lawful. This is your warning. Knock it off, or else. So that's where we are right now. And we'll see what happens when we get to the or else. But for right now, these warning letters, they're going out.
It'd be nice to have a panel of just people that look at this with you, so that in our communities or in our counties, we can dial this in and corporately get after it. I think that too many people are saying, there's too much coming in for you to do. We got other stuff we need you to be doing. And maybe we can somehow form a constituents coalition to assist in this, because we all need to get involved in this. We all have to get involved.
Well, it's the law. I mean, the tough part about a coalition, like you're saying, is that it's now state law, and it's my job as the Attorney General and the head of the Department of Justice to enforce the law. So, I mean, it's really on me. It's on me, and it's on Governor Gianforte, but as the law enforcement chief, this one really is on me. I'm happy to get some citizen input, and maybe that's something we can look at, but when it comes time to actually enforce the law and making sure companies are doing it, I mean, the buck stops here. Had a question over here first. Yes, ma'am. Yep. Well, okay.
Yes, my question is, all big problems start from legal places. Legal places, I mean from elementary schools. And we know your position on critical race theory. We also know that the Latins, as Bozeman School Board, they say that your board doesn't mean much. And they don't care about it. But the problem is that critical race theory is basically neo-Marxism. It's a tool of neo-Marxists to enforce their religious view. And First Amendment says government may not establish religion. When they enforce this critical race theory on children, they violate First Amendment. So how, and is it possible, and what should we do, and how it could be done?
Great question. Question was on critical race theory. I didn't even talk about this when I was talking, but about a week and a half ago, I issued a binding Attorney General's opinion
Yes.
making it illegal to teach certain portions of critical race theory in our schools. Well, look, many of the tenets of critical race theory are blatantly discriminatory. And they're blatantly discriminatory on the basis of race. That's illegal. Under federal law, under state law, under federal constitution, under state constitution, you cannot discriminate based on race. I don't know what's so difficult about this, okay? Now that isn't to say, and we made this very clear in my AG's opinion, that isn't to say that we can't teach about history. Of course we have to teach about history. Those who don't study history are doomed to repeat it. We have to learn about slavery. We have to learn about the Civil War. We have to learn about our Indian tribes and how they were treated in this country. I mean, go down the list. We have to learn those things. So when I see newspaper editorials wringing their hands about, oh, the AG says you can't teach history. That's baloney. That just tells me these people are better at screaming than they are at reading. They didn't read the opinion. Okay, but the question was, what do we do if this is coming up? Because we know Bozeman School District is one of the school districts that is at least toying with this idea. They haven't implemented it yet, but we know that they've formed a committee, and they're looking at curriculum, and they're trying to figure out what can we do here. So in that opinion, we laid out several options. You could sue on your own behalf. Bring it to me. I mean, the best thing I can tell you is report it. To report it either to the Department of Justice or to the Office of Public Instruction. Superintendent Arnson, I didn't just unilaterally come up with this opinion. It was requested by Superintendent Arnson under her power to request an opinion like this. She was hearing some rumblings about this stuff being out in some of the school districts, and she was concerned about the legality. So she asked me to look into it, and we did. But report it. I mean, the minute we know what's going on, the minute we can come in and investigate, and if necessary, take legal action.
Can I do a follow-up on that? So
Please.
what about the municipalities that are wanting to train along those lines? How do we stop that?
The answer is the same, and I actually expanded on that in the AG's opinion. It doesn't just apply to schools, it applies to any governmental entity. That means a county, that means a city, any of your local governments. Those are still a state entity. They receive federal money, they receive state money. You cannot discriminate based upon race. You can't.
Right.
So, I mean, I think certain of the trainings are probably okay, but it's when they start actually separating people out, making them segregate, making certain people of certain races say certain things. That is blatantly discriminatory based on race, and you can't do it. So, if there's an instance of it happening locally, let us know.
Okay.
Call the
So
Department of Justice.
The Department of Justice,
Yep.
thank you.
Yep. Let's go here. Yes.
Okay. Hi, Austin. My name's Dr. Tammy. Nice
Hi.
to meet you. I
You
think
too.
we know some people in common, so thank you for being hard-nosed. So I have a question, kind of like big picture. Thank you for your stance on the vaccines. I feel like a lot of the things that we struggle with, like her points were so great, and so were yours even about like the emails. Is it fair to say like federal supersedes state? President Trump wrote that executive order dated 12/21/2017 against racketeering, influence, and good old-fashioned corruption. Anything that breaches Title 18, Section 241, so like the email example, or 242 because they're regulators, is should be turned into the feds, minimum of 10 years in federal prison. So I feel like, I don't know if I'm asking this question well, but I just want to know, like, at what point does something get like kicked up that high? Because the way he wrote that executive order, it's very serious, and it says that if they are found guilty of corruption or trying to impede any right protected by the Constitution, every one of their assets will be seized.
So I guess I'm not familiar with that particular executive order. What I will say is that certainly there are instances where I think the Federal Bill of Rights is involved. And that's why in a lot of these lawsuits we filed, we've actually tried to preserve, it's usually a constitutional due process argument, and I don't want to get too wonky here.
Yeah.
But we always try to preserve, at least for a potential later bump up into federal court, a lot of these arguments. But like, so specifically on the email stuff, we're really not talking about anything federal. We're really talking just in state law here, because that's not a federal requirement on the states. That's one that the Fed has said, okay, states, you get to figure out your own state law, your own open records law, and what it applies to and what it doesn't apply to. So in this specific instance, we're not talking about FOIA, right? Because that's a federal law.
Yeah, no, but isn't it a breach of Title 18, Section 241, 242 in their example? I mean, wouldn't that be a breach of that?
I'm gonna need you to give me a legal brief on that.
I'm just a doctor. I could maybe do CPR, but no.
Yeah,
I mean, it's the USC Title 18 that, I think they've been trying to drill in our heads the last few years. And we learn as citizens, like how our government's supposed to work. Because we're all learning. I think we're all realizing like, wow, we should have been like awake to this like decades ago.
I'd have to do a little more homework on that. But I mean, I think there are absolutely instances where we're talking about federal constitutional rights being violated, and we got to keep all those avenues.
Especially with the vaccine,
Yeah.
even as a doctor.
Yes, sir. How are you, Paul?
Good. Where are we with constitutional carry on the campus?
Okay, the question is, where are we at with the constitutional carry on campuses? Okay, so that was one of the main points of House Bill 102, and great question, Paul. Campus carry was one of the main portions of House Bill 102. It just got challenged by the Board of Regents, okay? The reason it got challenged is there's a provision in our state constitution that says the Board of Regents, and I'm paraphrasing, but it says the Board of Regents is in charge of our university campuses, period. The Board of Regents has taken that and just, under their argument, and they literally argued this in their brief when they filed for an injunction. So about 2 weeks ago, they filed for an injunction. The Board of Regents filed for an injunction against House Bill 102, that specific portion, the campus carry, saying, oh my gosh, there's going to be shootings on the campuses, and our teachers don't feel safe, or students don't feel safe. They could not point to any actual concrete damage, which is what you have to file a lawsuit. Your damages cannot be theoretical, and that's entirely what they brought here. It was mind-blowing, but more mind-blowing was the argument they made. They literally argued that we, the Board of Regents, because of that language in our state constitution, we have the right to say what constitutional rights you can exercise on campus.
Yeah.
Stunning. I mean, just absolutely stunning. I mean, taken to its extreme logical, right? They can infringe on the First Amendment. They can infringe on the Fourth Amendment, the search and seizure. They can make students quarter troops in the dorm rooms. I mean, go down the list. But really what they're saying here is that we as the Board of Regents, we have the right to prohibit lawful adults who anywhere else with a concealed weapon permit can carry a firearm in Montana. But the minute you cross that imaginary line and step onto a campus, it's now illegal. I find that very concerning. But that's where we are right now. The court granted the injunction. I mean, that portion of House Bill 102 is not in effect on college campuses right now, pending further argument, further briefing. We're handling that one too. We're arguing that on behalf of the state, on behalf of the students. Got some great input from a lot of college students. Actually very encouraging, and a couple I think I might be offering jobs to.
Is the injunction just related to the university, or does it stop everything having to do with 102?
This is just the campus carry portion. Everything else is in place.
Thank you.
So we are now a constitutional carry state. You do not have to have a concealed weapon permit to lawfully carry a concealed weapon on campus. We have a handful of exceptions, but yeah, this is just on the campus carry.
Thank
Yes, ma'am. Hi, Tammy. How are you?
Oh, I'm good. Be sure to tell your neighbors, all your friends, it's what you can do besides give money. What you can do is when they start slamming Austin and Greg and Steve and the rest of them, I've said this before, your job is to stand up for them. We can't be the quiet weaklings anymore. Stand up for them. Every one of these people are carrying out the law. We live in a really pathetic Bozeman bubble that has no concept of life and truth. And I can say that because I've lived here 53 years since we moved here after getting married. How do we get people in the Gallatin County to understand that meth is not just a problem on the reservations, it's not just a problem in Billings where they have about 2 or 3 shootings a week. It's not just a problem in Great Falls, it is here in precious, progressive Bozeman. How do we let people know that, and can you help us with that?
I mean, I'm trying to blow the trumpet as loud as I can, but I think do what you're doing, Tammy. Get in a crowd, tell people, spread the word at coffee. If you're at church, tell them you're talking to the county attorney. Tell them you're talking to the sheriff. And man, did you know how bad the meth problem was? Because it is here. Now, there's some other specific problems in Gallatin County. It's not just meth. I've talked to your sheriff, and I mean, heroin's making a big comeback here. We're seeing a lot more of that. And where we start worrying about heroin, we start worrying about fentanyl being laced into it.
That's right.
And I've seen that too. That stuff's really dangerous. But I mean, to your question, Tammy, letters to the editor, talk to your church group, talk to your coffee crowd, spread the word. It is not just a reservation problem. It is not just an Eastern Montana problem. It's not just a Billings problem. Honestly, the towns that are most affected by it are towns like Bozeman that are on the interstate. Because that's where all this stuff is coming in. It's all the hub communities on the transportation corridors along the interstates. It's the Billings, the Bosemans, the Buttes, the Missoulas, even the Kalispells. Those are all huge hubs for this stuff coming in and being spread out from there. So don't kid yourself, it is here. Okay, I had several hands over here. Yes, ma'am.
I know that there's a temporary restraining order against Biden's debt relief for farmers, the USDA program to pay out for socially disadvantaged farmers. So it's a temporary thing, but is Montana looking at jumping in if it has to go further to help our farmers, which have also been affected, that may not be socially disadvantaged?
Yes. Yes is the quick answer. We are absolutely looking at that. I mean, I'm a farm and ranch kid. This is stuff I pay attention to. My wife used to work for the USDA, so I know a little bit about these programs. So yes, we are absolutely monitoring that. If we need to go further, we definitely will. Ma'am, yes.
My question has to do with some reading I've been doing, primarily in the Epic Times, where they just, and I think in today's thing, they said that there are now 13 states that have been to Arizona to see what they're doing there as far as the ballot auditing, and that they're presumably going home and they're gonna get going on their own issues. But Montana wasn't listed in that bunch, and I'm just wondering where you guys are with ballot auditing and election reform altogether.
So I'm gonna preface this by saying that you got the wrong statewide elected official for that one. That's the Secretary of State, Christy Jacobson. She's the Chief Elections Officer. She's in charge of that. Now, I don't want to speak for Christy, but I will tell you, she's being very, very aggressive, and she's absolutely looking into this. She's actually spearheaded all the election reform legislation that came out of the session that we're now being sued on. So I'm dealing with those two. I will tell you that the day after the election, so I was actually here election night in Bozeman. The guy who went on to become my chief legal counsel in my office, the next morning was on a plane to Arizona to go down and help with the audit and the investigation and look into stuff. His name's Derek A. Striker. You might know him. He used to work in the Secretary of State's office. Yeah.
Did you hear the news yesterday that all the ballots are at a cabin in Montana?
Right.
Did you hear about that?
I
It
did
broke
not
last
hear about
night, or I
that.
heard it this morning. Did anyone else hear that?
A couple weeks ago,
All the
actually,
Arizona, like, audit
Plot
ballots,
thickens.
they're in some, like, I mean, this is how, I don't know if it's just optics or what, some remote cabin in Montana. And, was it, do you remember where it was?
I was thinking around the Lear, but someplace.
I hadn't heard
It
that.
starts with a C.
So, I mean, the quick answer to your question is I really can't speak to that too much. I can tell you that we're absolutely gonna fight these lawsuits tooth and nail, and I think election integrity is paramount, especially what we saw in states like Georgia and Michigan and Arizona. Yep, yes ma'am.
Yes, what legal resource would counties or local communities have for in-city camping, as in tents we put up in parks and that sort of thing? And on trails.
Well, that should, I mean, if it's in city, that'd be your city attorney. I mean, there's the Montana League of Cities and Towns, they oftentimes help provide some legal guidance to city attorneys if they're dealing with an area maybe they don't know much about. So that's the Montana League of Cities and Towns. A lot of times MACO, the Montana Association of Counties, can help out with some of that stuff too. But that's more for counties.
So what does a person do when they want to have this addressed? Do they just call their police department or sheriff department and talk about various encampments and parks and trails?
If it's within the city of Bozeman, that would have to go through the city police. Yep, they're in charge of enforcing city ordinances and city laws, and at that point, if there's an infraction, the ticket gets written, that goes to the city attorney.
And ma'am, your county attorney is here, so don't let him get out of here without asking him those questions.
And that's not happening. My husband personally called the police department and got a phone call back on Max Avenue by Winco and back behind Penny Knoll. There's a lot of, vehicles there that are campers, and we talked to the manager of Winco.
I have the same
He
other
has asked the city for over 8 months now to address this issue, and nothing is being done. And the police officer said they're not doing it.
Well, that probably means they're being ordered not to. So now you're talking about your city council. Because ultimately, they're in charge of that stuff. Let's go back here. Yes, ma'am.
Yes, I'd like to say thank you on behalf of Gallatin Valley. Back in April 2020, myself, Terry White, and my friend Laura, you were the first to push back and show up at the health department meetings of the Gallatin County Health Department, push against the unconstitutional, the out of control power that Matt Kelly and the attorneys that represent the Gallatin County Health Department. And then, through that year, we have witnessed appalling violations of civil liberties with individuals and our businesses. And I myself am a councilwoman from Manhattan. Our businesses were hurt really bad. People were laid off, lots of money lost, and some businesses had to close. So I just want to say thank you that you stopped that ridiculous lawsuit against the Rock and R Bar. Yeah. Yes. That was done by our. Thank you for standing up for true justice.
You're welcome. Look, Santa Fe Reds is my favorite restaurant of all time. I lived here in the 90s. I lived here as a young kid for a couple of years. My mom came back to college. Santa Fe Reds has been my favorite restaurant in the state forever. And it's closed. They had to hang it up. Handwritten sign in the window, sorry. Yeah, I was glad to do it.
Thank you.
Yes, ma'am.
I want to come back to the meth thing. So I had heard from a highway patrolman, highway trooper, that because of the way that we legalized marijuana, that if they have the allotted legal amount of marijuana, that it prevents them from searching the rest of the vehicle. And so it's basically giving them a free ticket through the state.
So I think what he was talking, this trooper, he or she, I'm not sure. I think what they were probably talking about was the drug dog issue. This is an issue that nobody thought about when we were voting on the marijuana legalization initiative. We just rendered all of our state drug dogs ineffective. They literally all have to be retired. You have to get a whole new fleet of drug dogs, whether that's your local sheriff's office, your local PD, or the dozen or so that the Montana Highway Patrol has. We gotta get all new ones. Let me tell you something, those dogs are not cheap. All told, we figure you're in about $25,000, $30,000 per dog by the time you buy the dog, the training for the officer to work with that dog because they're partnered. Significant resource. But right now, the dogs that we have in our inventory are trained on all narcotics, including marijuana. So if you've got probable cause and you run a drug dog around a vehicle, and I mean, if I'm a drug dealer bringing drugs in the state of Montana right now, yeah, I'm gonna have a small amount of marijuana in there too. And my defense attorney is gonna say, well, that canine, that dog, he keyed off that marijuana, not the 6 pounds of meth. And that will be a thing. I mean, we're gonna have a lot of prosecutions that are gonna get challenged here, I predict, based upon that. So yeah, I mean, we're gonna have the real effect just leading up into that, but then we're also gonna have the financial effect of we gotta get a whole new fleet of drug dogs. And we're trying to figure out how to pay for that. I will say, I think within the Department of Justice, we've found a few little pots of money that we're gonna try to do grant programs out to the locals. So your local PD or your local sheriff's office doesn't have to foot that bill by themselves. We can give them some grant money and help get them a new drug dog. But it's gonna be expensive. Yeah, right next to you, yes ma'am.
So can I come back to the vaccination status? So the bill covers companies, but the Bozeman School Board actually said in one of their meetings, can we require vaccinations for our children? So how do we take care of that? Can we have that bill also cover public schools?
I got the sponsor right here, because I'm not sure the answer, honestly.
Could you repeat the question? She's wondering if 702 protects school children from schools requiring, I'm assuming you're just talking about the COVID vaccine.
Yeah,
because so all vaccinations that are required for school in Montana are delineated in the law. So a school board cannot arbitrarily say, by the way, we're gonna start requiring a new vaccine for schools. Vaccines that are required for schools are in the law. They're specifically said you need 2 doses of this, 1 dose of this, 1 dose of that. Second part of the answer is all school children in Montana are entitled to a medical or religious exemption from vaccines. And I was being so brief that I didn't mention the medical exemption bill that was signed into law this session greatly expands who can write a medical exemption to a child to anyone who administers vaccinations. So if your child has had adverse effects from vaccination, you can get a medical exemption, but all children in Montana can have a religious exemption to vaccination. You do not have to, actually it's an old Attorney General opinion. The religious exemption from vaccines for school children cannot be challenged. Your religious rights, your religious belief is not based on where you go to church or who your pastor is or if someone can vouch for you. It is based on your deeply held personal beliefs. Every school has a form you should be able to get from your secretary that you sign it and you say this goes against our deeply held personal beliefs. You sign it in front of a notary. I get ours signed at the school. So typically if they know what's going on, it's not a problem, but they cannot. If you hear of anyone that is trying to attempt in any way, shape, or form to require a COVID vaccine for school, you can call me, you can call the Lieutenant Governor, you can call the Attorney General, because it's against the law.
Does that include colleges? What about MSU?
Yes, that includes colleges. So colleges may, in Montana, universities, post-secondary schools may have more strict requirements than elementary and high school students. So the vaccine exemptions go from pre-K to post-secondary. And hopefully we don't see a problem with the regions. saying we can have more stringent requirements to include that, because it does
Don't give them an
not.
idea.
It does not, it does not include that. What it means is, probably a decade ago, I guess longer, I'm pretty old, but the universities, a lot of universities require a secondary MMR shot for college students because of recent mumps outbreaks on campuses. And so they are using that section that says you can have a different rule, but it is still in the law. They can't just make up rules out of the thin air. And the exemptions go for preschool to post-secondary, regardless, but they cannot make up new requirements.
Austin, can I follow up on the 702?
Sure, go ahead.
With Jennifer?
Okay, one last question. We gotta let Austin have time to get home. It gets dark at about 8:30, so.
I always get challenged to be very brief, and I have that same problem Jennifer does. So on 702, we specifically, Jennifer and I worked in some of the languages through amendments. We added a clause that says that nobody can require an experimental vaccine that's under EUA or that's still undergoing safety trials. We know that the COVID vaccine will be approved before the safety trials are done in 2023. That's why we added the or clause. So nobody under any circumstance can require that vaccine at all, no matter what. I mean, that clause in there should make it super clear. So to the other lady that was here earlier, it's all up to all of us. As much as I love what I'm hearing that Austin is also helping, in addition to Jennifer, the work she's done, we have to first stand up for our own rights.
That's right.
We would never be in this problem if people did not mask up from the very freaking beginning.
That's right.
I've not worn a mask a single goddamn time.
You guys are outstanding. Those are some great questions. And I think we're probably gonna have to wrap this up so that Austin can fight the construction to get home. You got anything you wanna finish with, everybody?
Just thank you. This is
Thank you.
this is always a lot of fun. Great to have a great crowd like this and answer questions and happy to thank you all very much.